Hello there and welcome to Bad JuJu. My name's Mama Jules and our case today takes place in southern Ohio just after Christmas in 2019. A couple fight to get custody of their newborn son, having been placed in foster care after being born with drugs in his system. When he was finally returned to their home, they weren't able to keep him safe, especially from themselves. So, if you're ready, grab a tea or a coffee, get comfortable, and together we will investigate the haunting case of Dylan Groves. Are you sitting comfortably? Okay then, let's begin. Jessica and Daniel Groves had been together for 24 years, married for 20 years, and had a 14-year-old son named Daniel Groves Jr. They lived in a trailer on Mount Hope Road, Otway, Ohio. Jessica previously worked as a nurse, but her nurse's license had expired on the 31st of October 2018, and she had not worked for quite a while before that. Daniel had worked for a farm supply company called Rural King. When Jessica became pregnant near the middle of 2018, she and Daniel had become addicted to drugs. She had said that she didn't become aware of her pregnancy until the middle of October 2018, when she was 5.5 months pregnant, and had told Daniel about the pregnancy a few weeks later. Jessica had no prenatal care and did not inform any medical personnel that she was pregnant. On the 10th of January 2019, Jessica and Daniel arrived at the Southern Ohio Medical Center, which is Southern Ohio's main hospital, early in the morning, where Jessica was in the later stages of labour and was 9.5 centimetres dilated, ready to give birth. Midwives at the hospital said that Jessica acted and looked like she was under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and was refusing to answer any questions and was just yelling at them to get it out, referring to the baby that was about to be born. She refused to submit to a drug and alcohol test, so a urine sample was taken by catheter, which came back as positive for drugs. They did not give her any pain medication so that they could fully monitor the baby's condition when he was born. The baby, Dylan, was immediately taken to neonatal and put on oxygen as he was born prematurely and was only 5 pounds and 4 ounces. He had no colour and he was shaking severely. However, the hospital staff said that neither Jessica nor Daniel asked about the condition of the baby, and Jessica seemed to be itching to get discharged from the hospital as quickly as possible. They tested Dylan's urine, which came back positive for drugs, and he soon started showing serious signs of drug withdrawal, and Child Protective Services were informed. He was kept in the hospital for 5 days to be treated for drug withdrawal and to give Child Protective Services time to come up with a plan of what they had to do. They had planned to release him to his father, who they believed to be clean of drugs, but before the plan was put into place, it was denied by the hospital as they had tested Dylan's umbilical cord and found methamphetamines, amphetamines, fentanyl and opiates, including morphine. That's when Children's Services decided to place Dylan in temporary foster care. Andrea Bowling was a 41-year-old married school teacher who had her own grown-up son who had moved out and gone to college. She had gone through the rigorous process of becoming a licensed foster parent. This included 40 hours of training classes, drugs tests, a federal background check, a medical and a home check. Interestingly, none of these were needed to send Dylan home with his father, who had nothing ready for the baby, not even a crib or a pack of nappies. Andrea had previously fostered a 6- and 7-year-old pair of siblings for 1 year and 4 months before they had been reunited with their parents in November of 2018. On January the 15th, 2019, she got a call from Child Protective Services asking if she would be able to foster a 5-day-old infant suffering from severe withdrawal symptoms. She agreed, and when she finished teaching for the day, she went out and picked up some clothes and nappies. She was able to collect the other items she needed from friends and family members. She arrived at the hospital at 6 p.m. to have further training to give him the extra help he needed as he was withdrawing, and then she collected Dylan and took him home. Andrea testified that she had taken 12 days off work and was going to extend her leave for longer so that she could focus her full attention on Dylan. She said that his withdrawal symptoms caused his arms to shake and that he would jerk and twitch. He had severe tremors and would sweat profusely. When he wasn't sleeping, he wanted to be held the entire time and liked to be wrapped up tightly in a blanket and held close. The parents have to be given visitation rights whilst the child is in temporary foster care, and Andrea told the jury that she had taken Dylan to a visitation where she believed Jessica showed up under the influence of drugs. She notified her concerns to Child Protective Services. However, despite Andrea's warnings, on Monday the 28th of January, Child Services placed Dylan back into the care of his father Daniel under the original plan. This plan was approved on the basis that Daniel was employed by Rural King and that he took 6 months' leave that he said he had available. This information also led them to believe that he was clean of drugs, as Rural King performed random drug tests, and seeing as he was still employed, he must be clean. The stipulation of Dylan being returned to Daniel was that Daniel must continue to pass drugs tests, and Jessica was not allowed to live in the house. She was to attend parenting classes and have drugs counselling. Once Dylan was back in the care of Daniel, he was seen by a paediatrician on February the 7th and February the 21st, where the doctor said he was developing well and was injury-free. They were supposed to have weekly home visits by Child Protective Services, but somehow that didn't happen. Patricia Kraft, a social worker, did manage to visit the house on the 28th of March and said that Dylan was being held by Jessica and that he showed no visible injuries. That was the last time Dylan was seen alive. Daniel began missing appointments, visits with Child Services, court dates and doctor's appointments. Child Services spent 2 months trying to get hold of him with no success. Alarm bells started ringing when they called his employer Rural King, who informed them that he hadn't worked there since the middle of 2018. Child Services kept stopping by the house and trying to contact him by phone with no success. On the 24th of April, they went to Daniel Jr.'s school to try to find out his father's location, but Daniel Jr. said he didn't know. Daniel Jr. was placed into foster care on that day. A calendar was later found in the home, and on that date it had been written in Jessica's handwriting, quote, "Worst day ever." Finally, Scioto Sheriff's Department got involved, and on May the 20th they dropped by to do a home check when the couple bolted into the woods behind their home on a 4-wheeler all-terrain vehicle as the sheriffs approached the house. The Scioto County Sheriff's Office got a search warrant for Daniel's address. On the 10th of June 2019, the Southern Ohio Drug Task Force and the Scioto Sheriff's Department surrounded the home and demanded that Daniel and Jessica exit the residence. Jessica, who was not supposed to be living there, opened the door and was arrested and was taken in for questioning. Daniel barricaded himself in and was later arrested after a 6-hour standoff with the authorities. Detective Jodie Conkle was assigned to the case, and she testified that all she knew going into the interrogation room that day was that a child was missing. She asked Jessica where Dylan was, and she answered that Child Protective Services had picked him up. Detective Conkle knew that that wasn't the case because they were the ones who had reported the baby missing. So Daniel was questioned separately, and initially he told the same story, that Children's Services had taken Dylan. The detective said she thought Daniel was on drugs as he spent part of the interview lying on the floor moaning and passing gas. He eventually broke down and he told her that he came home one day and found Dylan dead in his crib. He claimed that the baby was not injured and assumed that he had just died of natural causes. The detective went back to Jessica and she told her that Daniel had confessed that Dylan was dead and was trying to get more details, but Jessica wouldn't respond. She then went back to Daniel and he finally agreed to tell them where he had disposed of Dylan's body. On June the 11th, Daniel took them to a location, but there was no sign that Dylan had ever been there. The following day, Detective Conkle interviewed Daniel again, who insisted that he was telling the truth about where Dylan's body was. He also asked over and over again if he could see Jessica. The jail wouldn't normally agree to this, but Detective Conkle made a quick decision that would turn out to be a good one. After the couple had a casual conversation about their charges, they start talking about what they had told the authorities. They are clearly aware that they are being recorded, and they start whispering, thinking it can't be picked up by the mic. The audio isn't great, but you can definitely hear him say, quote, "They took me out there yesterday, wanted me to take him wherever he was at. I took them somewhere else." Afterwards, they talk about their charges, they complain about the conditions of the jail, and spend time talking about their dogs wondering what would happen to them. You know what they never talked about? Their children. Detective Conkle returns Jessica to the jail and resumes her interview with Daniel, and is now armed with some crucial information from the covert footage taken from the room. He eventually realised that he has messed up, and he breaks down and agrees to take them to the correct site where they can find Dylan. Detective Conkle testified that Daniel took them out to a grassy area and pointed at an old spring well about 100 yards away. Now, this isn't this type of well. This is literally a scary 30-foot deep hole in the ground. The wells get covered with grass and are hard to see, so you have to be careful walking around in the area. Police contacted the fire department. They weren't able to get their vehicles out to the well, so instead they carried all their equipment out there. First, they tried hard to pump out the water, but it was refilling the hole quicker than they could pump it out. The only option they could think of was to connect a number of straps together with a hook on the end and essentially go fishing, so to speak. After a long time and a lot of luck, the firefighters were able to hook onto an object and pull it to the surface. The object weighed about 80 pounds and it took several men to pull it out of the water. It was 2 plastic milk crates that were connected together with a heavy chain, 3 padlocks and zip ties. Inside the crate was 18 large rocks and an object wrapped in plastic. Within minutes of being brought out of the water, the smell of rotting flesh was unbearable. It turned out that wrapped in the plastic was the tiny body of Dylan Groves. In court, the medical examiner testified that Dylan, at the time of his death, weighed 4 pounds 8 ounces and was 20 inches long. There was bruising to his entire head from his scalp down to above his eyes. He had old fractures to his ribs and skull that were in various stages of healing. He had several fresh fractures, 1 to his skull, 3 to his arm and 1 to his leg, that would have been caused at the time of his death. She concluded that there was at least 3 separate violent events Dylan was subjected to, and the third caused his death. She couldn't give a specific cause of death due to decomposition, but she believed that he was already dead when he was placed into the well. Tests of Dylan's liver came back positive for methamphetamine and amphetamines, and she testified that these would not still be present from the birth, so he had ingested them recently. This means Jessica and Daniel had been feeding Dylan meth. In court, both Daniel and Jessica confirmed that he died on the 28th of March, making him just 77 days old. Jessica admitted causing his injuries, but maintained that they were accidental. The case went to trial because although Jessica had admitted to causing Dylan's death, the defence lawyers were trying to get Daniel's charges reduced from murder to the lesser charge of being involved in the disposal of a body, which carries a lighter sentence. Dylan Jr. testified that he saw black and purple bruising all over the top of Dylan's head and that it looked swollen. Jessica wanted to get on the stand to try to gain the sympathy of the jury by telling them a sob story about how everything was an accident. She continuously says that she can't remember how Dylan's injuries were caused. She was just concerned with keeping herself out of prison and trying to play on the jury's emotions. Jessica Groves was found guilty of all 11 counts and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, plus 32 years. Daniel Groves was acquitted of aggravated murder, but was found guilty of the remaining 10 counts and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 47 years. How can they live with themselves after what they've done to their defenceless, tiny newborn son who was so vulnerable and unable to protect himself? Hopefully Daniel Jr. will be able to get some counselling or therapy, as he will definitely need it after everything he has been through and seen, being brought up by these two selfish drug addicts who didn't deserve to create children. He's currently being cared for by his aunt. So, once again, that's all for this time. Hopefully we can meet again soon to investigate more true crime. In the meantime, look after one another and stay safe. Love to you all.